All right, so with two quarterbacks having already played on Thursday night and a couple teams on bye, there's only 26 remaining quarterbacks left to play. The final tier consists of just Jacoby Brissett. He's only scored 10 points in one game so far. There just isn't a lot of upside. It's a terrible matchup against Miami. And so if he's your only option, you got to play him, but they're just about everybody else that plays quarterback is a better option this week. Quarterbacks that I think are either low-end QB2s to potentially high-end QB3s, and I would avoid if you can, but I would still prefer over Jacoby Brissett, are Gardner Minshew, Matt Stafford, Tyler Huntley, and Bo Nix. Gardner Minshew draws one of the worst matchups against Denver. Denver is not a defense you want to play right now, and so I would avoid him if you can. Matt Stafford, he would be a very high upside quarterback, for at least for somebody that can't rush the ball. It's just without Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, I would avoid him this week in fantasy, even in a plus matchup against Green Bay. Tyler Huntley, he did score a rushing touchdown last week, so, there's a reasonable amount of upside. It's just, he didn't look very good through the air despite having one of the best receiving cores possible. And so, yeah, I would avoid him if you can, but he does have rushing upside. Bo Nix is playing Las Vegas this week. It's a middle-of-the-road matchup. The passing game isn't the best around him in terms of the playmakers, and so I do think there are a lot of better options, but he has scored 2 rushing touchdowns this year, and so he does carry a reasonably safe floor. I just don't think the ceiling is there this week. Quarterbacks that I think are QB2s but do carry a reasonable amount of upside are Daniel Jones, Andy Dalton, Deshaun Watson, and Caleb Williams. Daniel Jones draws Seattle this week. It isn't a great matchup against Reek Woolen and Devon Witherspoon. However, I do project him to score a rushing touchdown this week. He's going to be without Malik Neighbors this week, and so I do think he's going to have to utilize the short passing game and run the ball a decent amount. And so I do think he carries the rushing upside to give you a safe enough floor. It's just the ceiling without Neighbors probably isn't there this week. Andy Dalton is facing the Bears this week. It's a brutal matchup. However, he has looked really, really good in Dave Canales' offense. And so I do think there is the potential for a reasonably decent game. I just wouldn't project one of the ceiling games from this offense this week. It is a bad matchup. Deshaun Watson plays Washington this week. It's a very, very good matchup for him. He would have had a much better week this past week if they didn't get called for that holding penalty where he threw, an 80-yard touchdown to Amari Cooper. And so I do think things are starting to click a little bit more for this Cleveland Browns offense. And we know that he does have the rushing upside. He just hasn't been the player that he was with Houston. But this is a very, very good matchup. And so I do think he has a lot of upside this week. Caleb Williams draws the Panthers. It's a great matchup for him. We have seen that he can have a decent output if he gets enough passing volume. I do think the Panthers' offense is good enough to put up a reasonable amount of points. And so I do think they're going to have to score more than they did this past week. And so I do think he carries a little bit more upside this week, and I do think he gets a rushing touchdown. Quarterbacks that I think are mid to high-end QB2s this week are T-Law, Joe Flacco, Derek Carr, Geno Smith, and Aaron Rodgers. T-Law is, in general, a streaky player throughout his career. We haven't seen one of those ceiling games, but if there's ever going to be one this season, it's this matchup against the Colts. It is about as plus of a matchup as you can possibly draw. I do think he throws a touchdown to Brian Thomas Jr., and I do project him for a rushing touchdown. Joe Flacco, I do project to start instead of A-Rich. I would project A-Rich if he was playing to be a little bit higher than this. Jacksonville is also a great matchup. I think he throws a pair of touchdowns this week. It's just the rushing upside isn't the best. Derek Carr draws Kansas City. This is a plus matchup for him. I think the Saints offense is going to resemble a little bit more of what we saw in weeks 1 and 2 than 3 and 4. But I do want to see a little bit more consistency from this offense before I have him a little bit higher in these rankings regularly. Geno Smith has been amazing so far in Ryan Grubb's offense. The Giants are a middle-of-the-road matchup, but we've seen a very good amount of upside. And so I think unless you have one of the elite quarterbacks, I think he's a very good play this week. Aaron Rodgers is playing the Vikings this week. It's a plus matchup. I think they're going to have to score a lot of points to stay in this game, and I think they utilize the short passing game with the running backs a lot in this game. I think he's a very safe floor, high potential ceiling play this week. There's just a couple quarterbacks that I think have higher potential outcomes this week. If you like what you're hearing and seeing so far, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. Make sure you stay tuned for my wide receiver, running back, and tight end rankings this week as well. Quarterbacks that I think are low in QB1s this week are Sam Darnold, Justin Fields, Patrick Mahomes, and Dak Prescott. Sam Darnold plays the Jets this week. This is, in my opinion, the worst matchup. I say this every week. I hate the matchup. However, he's been so good in this KFC offense that unless you have one of the better quarterbacks, I don't see how you can sit him. And I do project that he throws 2 touchdowns in this game. And so I do think he's a solid start, even if it's a very poor matchup. Justin Fields plays Dallas this week. Without Micah Parsons, I think that he has a very good chance to stay upright for the majority of this game. And so I do think he gets a rushing touchdown, and I think that gives him a very safe floor this week. Patrick Mahomes has not been the fantasy quarterback that we've known for years this year. It's a very slow start for him so far. It's a poor matchup against New Orleans. However, he's still Patrick Mahomes. There's always the potential for him to have a massive game, and it's pretty hard to sit him. Dak plays Pittsburgh. I hate the matchup. However, he still has CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson. Dak is a little bit of a streaky player, but I think he has a solid game for us against Pittsburgh. Quarterbacks that I am supremely confident will be QB1s this week are Brock Purdy, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, and Jaden Daniels. Brock Purdy is playing Arizona this week. It's one of the better matchups. The offense is getting Debo back for a second straight week. He still has Brandon Ayuk. George Kittle isn't likely to play, and so that's why I don't have him quite as high as I would if I projected Kittle to play. But nonetheless, you're starting Brock Purdy in what is a fantastic matchup. Joe Burrow draws Baltimore. It is a good matchup. I think they have to pass a lot to stay in this game. His connection with Chase has been amazing recently. Yosivas has looked good. T. Higgins is even starting to come on. And so I do think he has a very solid game through the air. Kyler Murray is playing San Fran. I don't like the matchup the most, but his rushing upside is fantastic. He gets Trey McBride back, and so I think he has a very good game for us in fantasy. Jaden Daniels is playing Cleveland this week. It's a very poor matchup. However, he's been a revelation for us so far in fantasy, and so I do think he's a must-start, even in what isn't a good matchup. Quarterbacks that I think are elite QB1s for us this week in fantasy are Stroud, Love, Jackson, and Allen. Stroud draws Buffalo. It's a middle-of-the-road matchup. I think they have to score a lot to stay in this game, and so I think through passing volume alone, he's going to be a very good play for us this week. Love plays the Rams. It's a very, very good matchup. Despite throwing 3 picks, he was a top 2 quarterback last week for us in fantasy. I don't think he throws 3 picks this week, and I think he's a fantastic play. Lamar Jackson plays Cincinnati. It's a very good matchup. That Cincinnati defense likes to talk a lot of trash, but they don't seem to be backing it up recently. I think he gets 80 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, and so I think he's a fantastic floor play and ceiling play this week. Josh Allen has been either amazing or terrible so far for us in fantasy. I think this is a week in which he's going to be amazing. It's an insanely good matchup against Houston. I think he does exploit it, and I think he has a boom week for us in fantasy. All right, so to review, Jacoby Brissett is a quarterback that I would avoid at all costs. He's only scored 10 points in 1 game so far, and so basically every other quarterback has a lot more upside. Quarterbacks that I think are low in QB2s to potentially high in QB3s are Gardner Minshew, Matt Stafford, Tyler Huntley, and Bo Nix. Quarterbacks that I think are QB2s but do have a lot of potential upside are Daniel Jones, Andy Dalton, Deshaun Watson, and Caleb Williams. Quarterbacks that I think are mid to high-end QB2s with QB1 upside are T-Law, Flacco, Derek Carr, Geno Smith, and Aaron Rodgers. Quarterbacks that I think are either low-end QB1s to potentially high-end QB2s are Sam Darnold, Justin Fields, Patrick Mahomes, and Dak Prescott. Quarterbacks that I think are safe QB1s are Brock Purdy, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, and Jaden Daniels. And then quarterbacks in which I think are elite QB1s this week are CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. Who do I have too low in these rankings? Who do I have too high? Let me know below in the comment section and let me know why. With that being said, if you like what you've seen and heard, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel. And make sure you check out my tight end, running back, and wide receiver rankings as well.